I'm so excited. Welcome back to the Escape Podcast, where your hopes and dreams are shattered just like Captain Sulu's teacup. On today's episode, we'll be taking a look at Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.
Yes. And while you're over there looking for wherever that neutron radiation surge is coming from, go ahead and check us out on iTunes, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podomatic, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, and YouTube. On Instagram as well, hashtag The Escape Podcast 16, and email us at escapepodcast16@gmail.com.
The Klingon Empire has 50 years of life left to it.
To offer Klingons a safe haven within Federation space is suicide.
They're animals.
Jim, they are dying. And you, Captain Kirk, are to be our first olive branch.
Me?
The galaxy stands at a crossroads.
This is the Starship Enterprise. We've been ordered to escort you to your meeting on Earth.
Guess who's coming to dinner?
I have so wanted to meet you, Captain. One warrior to another.
Right.
On the verge of peace.
The Undiscovered Country. The future.
On the brink of war.
We come in peace, and you blatantly defy that.
We haven't fired.
According to our databanks, we have.
I shall blow you out of the stars.
Now, the crew of the Starship Enterprise
Will not be the instigators of full-scale war on the eve of universal peace.
They're coming about.
Battle stations.
fights not to win battles,
Incoming.
Signal our surrender.
Captain?
We surrender!
but to end them forever.
You do prefer it this way, as it was meant to be. Warrior to warrior.
You cannot take much more of this. Cry havoc! Heels! And let's slit the dogs of war. Fire!
Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.
So, how's it going, Dave?
Going good, Josh. How's things?
Things are well.
Theater of the mind, folks.
I forgot to mention, what makes this episode special is Dave and I are actually in the same room.
Oh, yeah. This is the first time you and I have been recording in the same room since
2016. 16. I stand corrected. So, I hear you just saw Wonder Woman,
Oh my
1984.
gosh.
Why don't you tell me about that?
Oh
it's a
my
little
gosh.
old, but hey, you just saw it.
Yeah, I just got around to seeing it. Apparently, this movie came out the year I was born. So,
Yeah.
I was so hopeful, especially because I really enjoyed the last Wonder Woman movie. And I go into this movie, and it's just right off the bat, just bafflingly bad. Just.
Would it have helped if Superman was there?
So, no. If it had the same plot, no. What were they thinking? I don't know. Yeah, there's just so many plot points of this movie that just really make me scratch my head, wondering why.
Wondering?
Yes, wondering. So I'm afraid of talking about it in a spoilery kind of way because it's still kind of a new movie.
Yeah.
So
Then no.
but okay, so I won't say any spoilers to the plot, but I will say that one thing that I liked toward the end of the 2 hour and 15 minutes of this movie was and here's the thing. I'll preface what I'm about to say with this. The movie's almost coming to an end. It's the climax of the movie, and I'm sitting in my seat in the theater thinking to myself, this is such a depressing departure from the Snyder universe of DC movies because this movie's so bad compared to what came before, in my opinion. And it's just, I mean, there's just nothing recognizable about this movie that would point back to the Snyderverse of the DC movies. And other than the fact that it's like the same actress. But other than that, you know.
Yeah, but Snyder didn't do the original Wonder Woman.
Well, Snyder directed Batman vs. Superman, which is where she made her debut.
Yeah,
and
but she was in it for like 5 minutes.
Well, anyway, like.
All right.
So anyway, but as I'm thinking that, suddenly, at the climax of this movie, for like 2 minutes, you suddenly hear the intro music / music that you hear when Bruce Wayne's parents are killed in Batman vs. Superman. It's this beautiful, like, piano-based music, and it's really good. But, I mean, and it doesn't really, like, make sense, like, if you think about it. But at the same time, the plot itself of the movie is about, like, people getting, like, I don't know. I'm trying to avoid spoiling it. Anyway, the track is titled Beautiful Lie from the Batman vs. Superman soundtrack.
Ace of Base?
Yeah. Is that a Ace of Base song?
It's a Beautiful Life. It's a beautiful lie. Whoa, oh. I just want to hear.
Don't think I know that one, sir.
Something to the break of dawn.
What?
All right.
Okay, so
Okay,
anyway, yeah,
that's okay.
that was the whole, like, 2 hours and 15 minutes of the movie was awful up until I heard that music. And even then, the movie didn't get any better. It's not like the movie suddenly improved, but it was just like this cool, oh, there it is. Something to point me back to Batman vs. Superman, where she made her debut and the place where, you know, her roots are. So yeah, that was a cool moment. So
That was not brief at all.
no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
It's okay.
I mean, I really don't have anything else.
That will be a mini episode all its own.
I don't
Your
really have
Wonder Woman
anything
rant.
else to talk about other than the fact that I think last week's CW's Superman pilot aired. I haven't seen it.
Is that like
It's
Superman and Lois or something?
Yeah,
it's called?
Superman and Lois. It's the new Superman
Okay.
CW show, and
I only know it exists.
I've heard that it's actually way better than everyone thought it was going to be. I've really fallen off the CW bandwagon over the last few years. I've lost complete interest in it. But I've heard that
Carl
the show
Weathers.
is what?
Carl Weathers, CW.
Yes. And so
Okay.
there's that, and of course, next month, March, is going to be when Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League premieres. So
John, whatever your name is, Dave.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
should-
Brandon.
You should start the Snyder Cut podcast.
I could
You
do
really
it.
should.
I could do
And
it.
you could educate idiots like me
But
that
honestly,
know ignorant to the...
Even if I did that, I would be in the minority. I totally admit that. Everyone
Well, that's what would make it so special.
hates
You'd be a diamond in the
the
rough.
Snyderverse. There's
All right.
I don't know, for every 3 fans of DC movies, one of them likes.
I think it's you and Snyder alone.
One of them likes it. The other 2 don't. So.
All right.
Yeah. So anyway,
You know what I've been watching?
that's what's up.
Frasier.
Frasier.
I got nothing new or exciting. Frasier.
From the Starship Bozeman?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I've been rewatching Frasier. I've seen it all before, but hey, that's all I got to say. It's great. It's wonderful. I love it.
I can't really say that I'm that familiar with Frasier.
Really?
I remember seeing...
Oh, then you're missing out, man.
So I remember seeing a few episodes, and I'm familiar with who the characters are, but it's a very casual, very surface familiarity. I'm very...
Well, I wasn't either. I didn't remember as much as I mean, I watched it when I was younger, but I didn't remember a whole lot when I rewatched it.
Yeah.
This is probably my 3rd, maybe 4th time rewatching it now. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen it quite a few. Well, anyway.
Speaking of Frasier,
Yeah.
they've greenlit a new Frasier series. I think.
I don't think
Kelsey
that's-
Grammer. No, he's coming back. It's happening.
I know. I don't
coming
think they
back.
should.
Oh, you don't think he should
No.
reprise the character?
No, like not unless it was a guest spot on some other show, but to revitalize Frasier itself,
As a new Frasier series.
I don't think
They're
so.
probably bringing back Niles and the gang.
I think they are, but what's the name? John something. The dad. He passed away.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think they should do stuff like that. All right.
Yeah.
Let's get down to it.
Hope they get the original dog.
Moose. All right. So, Star Trek The Undiscovered Country.
Yes.
It was released December 6th, 1991. It was directed by Nicholas Meyer, who mostly is known for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. He's done a lot of writing and producing of other movies.
Yes.
It stars, of course, the cast of the original Star Trek series with some guest cast. David Warner, Kim Cattrall, Rosanna DeSanto, hope I said that right.
I hope so too.
Christopher Plummer, and Brock Peters. It was made on a budget of $27 million, and the box office gross was $96 million. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a critical score of 82% and an audience score of 83% Very close there. So to give you a little bit of trivia, this is the first live-action use of Kirk's middle name, Tiberius. Prior to this, it was always James T. Kirk, until the animated series named him James Tiberius Kirk.
That is interesting.
The film has several Star Trek actors from other Star Trek features, including Brock Peters, Michael Dorn, Grace Lee Whitney, David Warner, Mark Leonard, Kurtwood Smith, Renee Auberjois. Hope I said that right. Sorry, Renee.
Rest in peace.
Yes. Like Star Trek II, Meyer once again has Spock doing something sneaky as he says the phrase, "Perhaps you're right."
What? Huh.
This movie was released between the Next Generation episodes A Matter of Time and New Ground. Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry died shortly before the movie's premiere, just days after viewing the film.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either. Wow.
Apparently he did not like it, and him and Nicholas Meyer got into quite a yelling match. Nicholas Meyer said he felt bad about that.
Oh, my gosh.
And finally, Christian Slater was paid $750 for his walk-on part, and he got to wear Shatner's pants from Star Trek II to Wrath of Khan. What an honor.
Shat pants. Yes, so the story of this movie, it's basically a murder mystery in space. A classic whodunit kind of story.
This, in my opinion, is the least sci-fi of the Star Trek movies. It has a sci-fi backdrop.
Yes.
But the story itself is a mystery political thriller, which honestly feels like something you might have seen on the Next Generation show.
Yes.
You know, everything is really tamed down in that way, the story.
Yes, yes.
It's difficult to surprise the audience with who the conspirators are, because obviously they're not going to have one of the established cast members become, you know, the murderer.
Right.
They're not going to have one of the main heroes that you followed since the show.
They're not they're not going to make Bones the killer.
Right. So obviously you have Kim Cattrall's character Valeris there, so it's pretty good assumption for a newcomer seeing this that Valeris is probably in on it.
I will say my first viewing of this movie, I did not suspect her. But
I don't
I'm also
remember.
really bad at inference.
Yeah. One of the things I wondered within the story is, like, what do the Romulans have to do with it? They don't really establish why they're there. I mean, there's a Romulan ambassador on Starfleet Command on Earth, and they never really establish what do the Romulans have to do with the story. Now, I have a theory on what it could have been.
I've heard a lot of theories about
okay.
that, but honestly,
What
I'm
are
not
they?
sure what to believe.
Okay.
I had to do it.
Personally, I was thinking, since they don't flat out say what the Romulans have to do with it, it might have been interesting if you found out the Romulans were in on it alone. Because think about it, okay?
Yeah. That's a
the
good point.
Romulans are enemies with the Federation, and they're also enemies with the Klingons. If they know that their two enemies are joining forces, now their two small enemies become one big enemy against them. So by keeping their two enemies fighting each other, you know, it kind of keeps some heat
Eases
off of
the
them.
pressure off them.
Yeah, but they never established that within the movie what he has to do with it. But that seems like a safe assumption.
Yes, and the ambassador is the only Romulan we see, right?
He's the only one you see. Now, I do think it was interesting to have this idea that not everyone in Starfleet is on the up and up. Typically in these movies and shows, everyone in Starfleet is pretty honest and, you know, about, you know, just good morals and, you know, like they want to help and all that
Get
stuff.
the moral high ground.
Yeah, and I think it was, though, a good idea to paint that people are still people. And I think that's one thing Nicholas Meyer has done well, even in back in Star Trek II, is the idea that they still have problems, you know, like regular problems. Like
eyesight. Admiral Kirk.
Yeah. And it kind of made me wonder, you know, if the Romulans were the ones responsible for the new bird of prey they can fire while cloaked. In case anyone doesn't know this, within Star Trek lore, the Klingons and the Romulans always had the cloaking technology. So that makes their ship literally invisible to the naked eye and to sensors. But if they want to fire, they have to drop their cloak, which makes them appear again. Also, another rule is they can't operate shields while cloaked.
Yes.
So while they're cloaked, they're invisible, they can't fire, and their shields are down.
So it's a trade-off. You become a lot more vulnerable,
right?
But you're also invisible.
Yeah, which is nice. But it seems to me, since they established in the original series that Romulans and Klingons at the time had joined forces previously, and they shared a lot of technology, maybe this bird of prey is actually the result of Romulan engineering.
Well, yeah, and even at one point in the original series, they talk about Romulans using Klingon-designed ships
Was it
at
the
some
Romulans
point.
too? I thought that it was the...
It was the Romulans.
Oh, see, I thought it was the Klingons using the Romulan stuff. Because that's
it
another
probably
thing.
happened both ways, honestly.
The way they...
Plausible.
The Klingons come across to me as more of a conquer race.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Borg, but not assimilating. They go out, they conquer a group of people, and then they would adapt their technology, weapons, any tools. I don't see them as much being scientists, developing their own stuff. I'm not saying they didn't.
Right.
But just more so like, hey, if we can take over this people...
Yeah,
and
that's
take
their focus as a culture.
is to conquer.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is actually my favorite Star Trek original series cast movie. It's also the first one I ever saw with you. And you may or may not remember.
I do remember that, actually,
okay, so,
surprisingly enough.
Yeah, so it's just a quick little story here. I had never seen anything before Generations. And I remember one time you came to my place and you were like, hey, let's watch an original series cast movie. And I'm like, I don't know. I had known about the original series. I wasn't really into it, so I figured the movies were bad, but I just never really looked into it. And so you were like, let's check this out. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. It's a Klingon murder mystery Star Trek movie.
Right.
Can't go wrong. And so I loved it. And it's still I would say overall this is my second favorite Star Trek movie of all the Star Trek movies.
Okay.
Second only to First Contact.
So, yeah, one of the things I also like is they did a little bit, in my opinion, what would probably be a throwback. They have Kirk fighting a double of himself.
Yes.
And just the fact that Kirk gets in a fist fight.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a nod to the original series,
Oh, yeah.
which is great since this was the last movie.
Oh, and on a side note related to your point, they also do that in Generations with Kirk fighting fist fight the bad guy in that movie, and they even throw in like the da, 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 like classic original series. Like it's real quick. It's like 5 seconds, but you hear like the classic original series fist fight music.
You'll have to point that out. I don't recall.
Cool. Yeah.
Another thing I liked about this movie was it gave the extra crew, Sulu, Uhura, Chekhov, Scotty, a little more to do.
Yeah.
Which, it's not to say they haven't done anything in the other movies, but I feel like 5 and 6 gave them more than they ever got to do, like little things with them. Yes. And that was nice that it's not just completely revolving around Kirk and Spock. And
Everyone
a little
gets
bit McCoy.
A little bit of share the limelight, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you may remember in the past we have spoken about the Praxis effect on this podcast.
Yep.
And so this movie was the birth of the Praxis effect.
Right.
Hence the name.
So yeah, the Praxis
exploded.
is the Klingon moon that blew up, and it has this shockwave that goes out. It was developed by ILM, and then, of course, when George Lucas decided to redo his Star Wars movies back in the 90s...
They threw it in there.
The Praxis effect, and it's still called that.
Yep. And so they do that, and it seems a lot more massive because like it just completely engulfs the Excelsior.
Right, yeah.
So that's cool, and you also get the sense that it's like shaking the ship, and it seems like it's a bigger threat than it really would.
Although I don't understand, if you're in space, why wouldn't they just go up or go down?
Yeah.
He says turn it into the wave. I was like, okay, whatever. I guess Captain Sulu.
He's a Starfleet captain. He knows what he's talking about.
And although it's cool that Sulu got a promotion, I do think it's kind of a bummer that he was never there for that final shot. Like, it seemed a little lacking when you see that final.
It's sad. Yeah.
Because it was a great setup. You have them looking at the camera like they're looking at
the
us.
final shot.
The final shot. There's no extended extra crew there.
Sulu's
but
chair.
Sulu's chair is empty.
It's empty, yeah.
And I was just like, man, I wish that some way they could have made that work.
Yeah, like maybe our helmsman died. Quick, Sulu, beam over here.
Well, I was thinking
like
if the Excelsior was damaged enough where, But anyway, it's...
Yeah, I gotcha.
Now, I don't hate Nemesis. However, I definitely have mixed feelings on it. But it's a shame that really the Next Generation crew didn't get the same type of send-off for their final movie like the original cast crew did, because I do think they got a great send-off.
They were... I think it's because they were under the impression they might get one more movie when they did Nemesis.
That is it.
So, but I don't know. There are also some hints and some notes and some things here and there about Nemesis that do kind of also feel like it's a final, TNG cast movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I do have some plot holes and inconsistencies and gripes about the movie, though.
Gotcha.
I did want to go over. So,
Okay.
If the conspirators on both sides wanted war to continue so bad, wouldn't it be easier to blow up one of their own ships or star bases themselves and just blame it on the other guy? Instead of having to get in league with them, like they could just blow up one of their own star bases and be like, hey, the Klingons did it. And the Klingons could blow up one of their own ships or one of their bases on another planet and say, hey, the Federation attacked us, and get everyone mad again. It almost seems like it was overly complicated, but
I see that point.
I mean, it wouldn't make for as good of a story, but another thing is, Gorkon's daughter says, quote, the Federation's is a Homo sapiens only club. Does she not realize that the Federation is made up of multiple alien species? And that alone,
very good point,
kind of reminds me of like a lot of politics today where people will totally pretend like certain facts aren't real just to try to make their point stronger. Because I thought like that is such a...
That's called spin.
Yeah, that was such a stupid argument for her to make, and it made no sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Who beamed the assassins there and back if Valeris was on the bridge?
Oh, my goodness.
They made a point that the assassins were, in fact, the Enterprise crewmen.
Yeah.
Who beamed them there and back? It almost seems like there would have to be someone else, because Valeris was on the bridge the entire time.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is there have been times when, like, I think there was even a couple times in
Automatic
the original
transport
series
kind of
where
stuff.
they did it themselves, then ran over to the...
I guess, but who beamed them back?
Even if they...
I mean,
these
these don't make it a bad movie. Okay, I got two more. Being that she's the communications officer, shouldn't Uhura have known the language of their enemy that they've had for the past 70-some years? You'd think?
You'd think. Yeah, and, well, I mean, they do that with Hoshi on Enterprise. She knows.
Right,
Klingon
yeah, it just seems like it would make
when they
sense
first
if you're
encounter the Klingons.
Right, and if you're a communications officer, it seems like you would want to know not only some languages, but especially the language of your main enemy.
Yeah.
And my only final gripe would be Martia's voice and eyes change when she becomes Kirk. Every other thing she changes into, her eyes stay yellow, her voice stays the same.
Interesting.
But when she becomes Kirk, because they want to fool the audience as well, she's able to mimic his voice and her eyes change.
Wow. So her eyes stayed the same
for every other creature,
even when she changed
Kirk.
Into that little girl?
Yes.
Wow. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I guess I see the point there that they were trying to do. Yes.
All right, so let's move into the themes of the movie.
I would say the theme overall of this movie is things change. You could narrow it down to 2 words. Things change.
Right.
Yes.
So obviously the big ones are Chernobyl and the Berlin Wall. Chernobyl was a nuclear facility that blew up in the USSR, I believe, in 1986, which is what Praxis is referencing when it blows up.
Okay.
The whole thing was that the Klingons could no longer afford to keep up their military efforts when now their planet is in bad shape.
Right.
And of course, the Berlin Wall came down in November of '89, which represents the neutral zone as it was between the Federation and the Klingons.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know about that.
One thing I think that's really great, because obviously in the original series and its movies, the Klingons are the villains. However, when you get to the Next Generation, they are not joined with the Federation; they are allied with it.
Yes,
and I think it's actually nice to see.
There's still some animosity.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah, in little factions and stuff. But I think it was nice to see the transition of where that ended with the original cast and moved into the Next Generation era of seeing that changeover. We get to see that handoff, or at least the start of it.
Yes.
Another thing, a lot of people talk about this being about racism. But I don't know if I believe that. Is it hatred due to racism or prejudice? Because Kirk blames the Klingons for the death of his son. I'm sure countless crew members over the years. He's definitely not a racist. He has many people that he's met over the show and the movies that are of different alien species. He doesn't seem racist to me. I just think it's because that has been your enemy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's just really hurt about the fact that it just happens to be the species of the killer of his son.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying even before that, think about it. In the show, he's been at odds with these people for years, well before his son was murdered. You know, always been at war with these people and having to watch out for them. There's an episode of the original series where they team up with the Klingons. Remember?
Yes.
To, you know, with that, some kind of alien entity. They're actually all laughing together.
Yeah.
You know? I don't think Kirk is racist.
No, I don't think so either.
I think it's just all those years of that. But even, you know, after the death of his son in Star Trek V, they were sharing a drink with the Klingons. The very Klingons that had been hunting him the whole movie.
And just the previous movie before this
Yeah,
one.
Korg or whatever his name was.
Yeah.
You know, they were in the observation or the mess hall of
Yeah.
the Enterprise, sharing drinks and stuff, you know.
Wow.
So I don't think he's really racist.
That might have been an event that led to this, you know, plot, you know, because they were
it's
kind of
like
becoming buddy a little bit in that
yeah,
scene
it's like
in
I think they wanted them to have a stronger hatred and distrust of one another. So if you look back at the previous movie, Star Trek V, it almost doesn't make sense. Wait, he was pretty cool to have them on his ship, and he didn't seem to have... I mean, he had that general. Remember the general that was like kind of like the old washed-up drunk?
Right, yeah.
And he didn't seem to have any problem with him being there. Even once he got that forced apology out of the one, he had him and all his people on the ship, and they seemed to be just fine and dandy. But they really had to ham it up that Kirk hates Klingons, and you know they're not trustworthy, and you know to really make it seem like a bigger deal. Even though
forward.
the previous movie, he was decent with them, you know.
Yeah. Almost makes me wonder why none of those Klingons that he was buddy with in Part 5 showed up in Part 6 at all.
Well, I mean they didn't maybe establish it quite as much during the original cast movies, but there's lots of factions of Klingons. It seems like the house of this one, the house of that one.
That makes sense.
So, you know, maybe some of them are a little more rogue than others. One of the other things I really liked about this movie is it seems like they finally really had Spock have this nice balance between his humanity and his Vulcan logic.
Yeah.
Where, you know, it kind of got old after a while. These logical humans always, you know, nitpicking at, you know, how stupid we are.
Yeah.
And it seems that he's got this middle ground with his two halves, which really honestly made him a more interesting character for me, is where he stands at that point. He does and says a lot of things in this movie that were not old Spock.
Right.
It's kind of like a new Spock.
Yeah. Post resurrection.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of that changed after Star Trek 2 and going with Star Trek 3, you know.
Yeah. Which is funny because in Star Trek 5, he was like at the campfire scene. He was just like, he seemed so oblivious to a lot of the nuances of humanity.
I mean, just because he's found a balance doesn't mean he's going to know stuff, I guess, but...
Correct, yeah. I think this movie does a really good job of showing the awkward transition for Starfleet, for how the Klingons go from being an enemy to an ally.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really feel Kirk's objection to it at first. Like in the conference room with all the other Starfleet brass there, and like he's like, you know, you chose me. It's like it seems like you feel the confusion. You feel Kirk's like the way he is just like, Spock, you're my friend. You chose me. Do you know that they killed my son?
That was the one. I get what you're saying, but that was the one part where you know how everyone does that when they heard to mimic Shatner, they do.
Personally
vouched for me. Like it's just like there was that one time I was like, I usually think people really over exaggerate with how he actually acts, but that one scene I was like, it was pretty Shatner. I was like, come on,
he was really
Shatner reshot that.
Yeah, but I just feel like he was overacting it, but it really like just I felt what he was trying to convey.
No, I get it. Yeah, I mean,
and like because Spock is supposed to be his like best friend, and Spock, from his point of view, is like, you're overlooking the fact that my son was killed by these people, and you want me to be like in this position to be their friend. It like I felt how Kirk felt a little betrayed from Shatner's performance, and it was palpable.
So let's talk about the effects of this movie.
Yes.
One of the things right off the bat, I thought it was great to see, I believe it's the D7 battlecruiser.
Yes.
Which we haven't seen since the intro of Star Trek the Motion Picture, although we kind of see it in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan with the Kobayashi Maru.
Yep.
I actually think that ship looks cooler than the Bird of Prey. It seemed like the Bird of Prey got way overused, in my opinion.
I agree completely.
But yeah,
I wouldn't say it's cooler. I mean, it's different, and I also like the fact that it is not used as much. So
it's bigger.
It's not. It doesn't. It's not. It's not as tired of
Yeah.
a thing because it's not as you don't see it as often.
Another thing I think is pretty cool. In a lot of sci-fi movies, especially newer ones, they do this thing where like their display screens are actually glass and you can see through it, and everything's touch screen.
Yep.
And I was thinking, that's really just them
because
trying
it
to
looks
make
cool.
Yeah, it's just because it looks
They
cool.
do that on Discovery.
But yeah, I was looking. A lot of the stuff which makes sense. It's knobs, it's switches, it's buttons which makes sense. Like you want to make sure you're pushing the right button and not actually bumping it with your finger. And to me, it makes sense, especially on a military ship, to have switches and buttons.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was great.
Tactile.
I also thought it was great that they're actually reading books, actual paper books.
In which scene?
The scene where they're trying to speak Klingon. They have books. They have actually a ton of books laid out.
Yeah, that is.
Even though, again, I still think it's weird that Uhura wouldn't have known it.
Well, and it's funny because then it goes back to the original series where they're like talking about, you have books in this place, and they have the guy who's got the computer.
Yeah, it was his lawyer.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is they show that Kirk kind of grew up because obviously in Star Trek 2, Spock gives him a book. Is it The Tale of Two Cities? I think.
Once and Future King, I believe.
Oh, are you making stuff up, or is that real?
No, I believe that's
okay.
Yeah. I believe it's Once and Future King.
Okay,
I could be wrong.
Yeah, you probably are. I thought it was A Tale of Two Cities.
One of those two.
Anyway, this is probably the most ambitious Star Trek movie regarding the effects, probably since the motion picture.
Yes.
I mean, we have a zero-gravity scene with blood. We have shape-shifting, probably more background aliens than we've ever had. You have a torpedo that literally goes straight through the saucer section. I really feel like he was doing a lot more big action than we've ever had, and a lot more effects.
Yeah, it was like really on the edge of your seat stuff happening, especially with that torpedo that blasts through.
Yeah, it literally goes through the hole.
It's so intense. I've never seen anything like that in
Well, yeah,
Star
you're
Trek.
seeing sets blow up. You actually see the room that they were eating in get blown to smithereens.
I'm assuming those were miniatures, but yeah.
I know they showed like a snowy location on the Genesis planet in Star Trek 3, but it was kind of cool to see, like, you see a lot of desert planets. It seems like it was cool. You see, like, Rua Pente was basically a Hoth planet, an ice planet.
It was Hoth.
It was kind of cool, though.
It was
different. It was different, though.
Yeah. Speaking of sets, it's cool to see the TNG sets kind of redressed and used as sets for this ship. It's not exactly recognizable, but it's more like something you have to research and learn about.
Wait, what's that? What?
Like, for instance, the area where they're having dinner with the Klingons is 10 forward.
Right.
Redressed. It's a TNG set, redressed.
Right. Well, I think they started doing that in Star Trek 5, which makes sense because Star Trek 5 was the first original cast movie to actually be filming while the Next Generation show existed.
Right. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time we see a bald Klingon.
Yeah, and a lot of people talk about how there's the original series Klingons, which look like humans. Then you have your motion picture and beyond Klingons.
Right.
But, I actually feel like they've really changed every movie. Yeah. Because if you look at the Klingons in the original movie, the motion picture, the ridges are actually very tight. They're like almost like a spinal cord going across the top of the head.
Yeah.
Whereas once we see them again in the Search for Spock, the very next time, they're going wider across the forehead, but they're more subtle.
Yeah.
Like the ones in the motion picture were huge, protruding out.
Yeah.
And then, every movie is just a little different. Personally, I like the way a lot of the Next Generation did it.
Yes.
So if you look at a picture of Worf, for instance, our favorite Klingon, you'll see the ridges not only go high off the head, but they're wide too. Yep. And it seems like a lot of the Klingons, it didn't.
Yeah.
And I thought I read somewhere, which of course, there's so much backstory on the Klingons and Star Trek stuff in general, that for a Klingon, their ridges change as they get older. And certainly if you look at Worf from season 1 to 2, 3, 4, and on,
yes,
you see they changed his stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that. It's like almost like
it's not
maturing.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point about the ridges starting in the front and going along the back of the head down into the spine in the motion picture. I know you don't like Discovery, but that is also something they did on Discovery for the Klingons. They did the ridges all along the head into the spine.
Yeah,
So
I'm not gonna go. Okay.
I know. I just wanted to mention that.
Next, I want to talk about the legacy of the film. Not only was Star Trek VI the last movie to feature the original cast, but it was also celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Star Trek franchise. So it had a lot to live up to.
Yes, it did.
And I think they did really well with that.
I think there was even some kind of big TV special at the time of a 25th anniversary special coinciding with the release of this movie.
And if I'm not mistaken, I thought I read somewhere that Nimoy doing the unification episodes, which only an episode or two before A Matter of Time, right?
Okay.
The part of the reason for that guest spot was to kind of bring some interest for the next gen only fans to have, okay, here's Spock from the original cast movie. Oh, wow, this movie's coming out that has Spock, to try to help, segue some next gen only fans into the original cast movie.
Right, yeah, and that would have, I think that works perfectly, because in Reunification they talk a lot about some of the plot points of Star Trek VI,
which was cool because you're getting little tidbits of it before the
Yeah.
movie actually came out.
Yeah, so it helps move the plot along both in the episode of Next Generation and Star Trek VI. So one of my favorite lines in this movie is, "I'm going to make myself a pot of black coffee." I think that's...
You're a coffee guy.
Yeah, I'm a coffee guy. But, there's been so many times where I go to make myself some coffee, and I either think about that line or I actually just say it. And usually it doesn't matter if I say it because I'm not around anyone who knows what the heck I'm talking about. So, it is cool, speaking of the Romulan that we were talking about earlier, it's cool to see an original series style Romulan.
Right.
Which I don't think we ever saw again after this movie. And we hadn't really seen since the original series before this movie.
Yeah, in the original series, the Romulans essentially look just like Vulcans.
Correct.
Which they're an offshoot of one another. But in the Next Generation, they put some yeast in there, the forehead's more pronounced.
And then on Picard, it's like a mix of both. You see the forehead pieces and then the smooth heads.
We don't talk about STD or Picard here on this show. Okay. Star Trek ended in 2005, my friend. The franchise is dead. Just see my Instagram post.
Yes.
All right.
Check it out, folks. Instagram. So the timing of us doing this podcast episode today is interesting because I've been listening to another podcast called The Delta Flyers.
Schrader. What do they got that we don't? Star Trek stars?
Star Trek
Big whoop.
stars on the podcast every week. Anyway, so the way it works is they do an episode of Voyager every week, and they put a new one out every Monday. They've been going since the beginning, since season 1 of Voyager. And so here we are 7 or 8 months into their podcast, and they already made it to season 3. And so what's cool about us doing this episode tonight, here we are on a Sunday night. Tomorrow, Monday, the Delta Flyers will be releasing their newest episode, which happens to be Flashback. And Flashback, the Voyager episode Flashback, is centered all around the Undiscovered Country, and it's when Sulu comes back.
Was that for the 30th anniversary?
Yes.
Because DS9 did their Trials and Retribulations episode.
Yes. Trials and Tribulations
Voyager
and
did
Flashback. And they also I think First Contact was also released around that same time as a part of for the 30th anniversary. Yeah, so it was cool to have Sulu come back, and I also just want to mention, because of that Voyager episode where Sulu came back, that was what started the hype train between the late 90s, early 2000s, before Enterprise came out, for the fans wanting a Sulu show.
I remember you talking about that.
It was a whole thing. It was a whole hype campaign, email campaign, online. It was just everyone writing in to Paramount asking them to do it. And I remember sending George Takei a fan mail email. It was an email that I sent him. And I actually got a response, and I still have it. in my email inbox. So he was basically saying, yeah, I'd love to do a Sulu show, a Captain Sulu. I think they were talking about just calling it Star Trek Excelsior. And it would have been sweet, you know. Tuvok was on the bridge, or at least at some point.
Would he have been in the show as himself?
Yeah, and so because that's one thing we learned on the flashback episode is we learned during the during the Undiscovered Country movie, even though we never see him in the movie, obviously we know as a part of the canon that Tuvok was a part of the Excelsior crew and served on the bridge from time to time. So, and yeah, I think it would have been cool. It didn't happen, obviously, but it would have been cool. Sulu got to come back a few other times as Captain Sulu on the Starfleet Academy PC game, which I had, and a few other things, a few other games where the original cast came back and voiced their characters, and yeah, so it was cool.
So, final thoughts. Why don't you start us off?
Final thoughts. What can I say? I love this movie. I said this earlier. I'll say it again. It's my favorite TOS cast movie.
I think I know, but what are you grading this movie?
E.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to say this. It's an A+, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I've never graded a movie on this podcast an A+.
I don't know.
I think this might be the highest grade I've ever graded a movie.
We've been kind of going through the old episodes, so you can find out.
Yes. But so far, yeah, I think that's the case.
So for me, I think Star Trek VI strikes the perfect balance with its action, mystery, comedy, and suspense.
Yes.
It's familiar enough for the diehard fans, yet offers something new to keep things fresh and exciting. But it also allows non-Star Trek fans to watch it as a standalone movie, which I think is great.
It's perfect, yeah.
It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's a satisfying goodbye to the cast and crew of the original Star Trek, and I also give it an A+.
Sounds good, man.
Well, thanks again for listening. If you made it this far, we appreciate it. Feel free to write us an email at theescapepodcast16@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at #theescapepodcast16. And look for us on Apple Podcasts, Podomatic, Podcast Addict, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and 1,000 others that I don't care to list. Check the show notes.
Yes.
Until next time.
Yes. Live long and prosper.
Oh, that wasn't even planned. How about that?
Oh my gosh, did that just actually happen? We just did that at the same time.
It did.
That's pretty cool.
I'm so excited.
We're just so predictable. See you guys.
Bye. Blah, 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 blah.